Hey everyone, did you know that transporting the world's largest things can come with a set of pretty difficult challenges? It's not easy to move massive oil platforms or dangerous radioactive sludge. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the top 15 most amazing transportation operations in history. Let's begin. Number 15, the Troll A platform. Behold the Troll platform. It is officially the largest thing ever moved by man. Residing off the coast of Norway, the massive structure is an offshore natural gas drilling platform. It comes in at a staggering 1,548 feet tall. This platform weighs an unbelievable 1.2 million tons. But it didn't always reside in its current location. It wasn't built in the middle of the ocean, so at one point it had to be moved from the Norwegian coast at Vads to the Troll field. The journey was 120 miles, which doesn't sound that far, but given the sheer size of this thing, you better believe it was an arduous undertaking. 10 tugboats were enlisted to pull this platform through the water at a painfully slow speed of just 1 knot. All in, the transport operation took 7 days and 6 hours, and the whole thing was televised so onlookers could marvel at the massive platform being tugged through the water. Once it reached its location, it was stabilized by piles. Now, these piles are 118 feet long and were secured in the seabed below. To date, the Troll A platform is the largest, the heaviest, and the tallest structure ever moved by man. Number 14, the Space Shuttle Endeavour. The Space Shuttle Endeavour was built to replace the Space Shuttle Challenger, and during her time in service, she had a very successful career. But like all good, hard-working space shuttles, it eventually came time for her to retire. And when that time came, the iconic space shuttle had to be moved. At a length of 122 feet and a width of 78 feet, moving this cosmically inclined shuttle was no easy feat. She had to move from Cape Canaveral in Florida all the way across the United States to her new home at the California Science Center. The first part of the trip wasn't too hard. She was flown across the states via a Boeing 747. But once she arrived at the Los Angeles International Airport, well, things got a little interesting. The shuttle had to make the final leg of the journey, a 12-mile hike, by way of roads. To accomplish this, power lines had to be lifted, and entire streets had to be closed down to make way for the shuttle. Yet needless to say, it was a popular event, attracting nearly 1.5 million people who came to watch and celebrate the shuttle's historic transportation. With the help of police, street traffic controllers, and the general public, the Endeavour made it safely to the Science Center. Needless to say, transporting the Space Shuttle Endeavour proved to be quite the endeavor. Number 13, the Evaporator for the Saudi Arabian Desalination Unit. Okay, we can't drink seawater, duh, it's too salty, but we have so much seawater, so it only makes sense that we develop a way to separate the salt from the water in the sea. This process is called desalinization, and Saudi Arabia has some of the biggest desalinization plants on the planet. But for this process to work, there needs to be an evaporator. I'll spare you all the scientific BS and the processes involved, but just know that an evaporator is key. But evaporators aren't small, so moving them can be a pretty hard process. In 2020, a company called Dongbang Transport Logistics was in charge of moving an evaporator from Vietnam to Saudi Arabia. The journey saw the evaporator cross the South China Sea, the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, and the Aden Bay. It was moved from the evaporator factory to the shipping port by way of oversized transportation. From there, it was moved across the water using a self-propelled flat barge vessel called the Dongbang Giant, and this evaporator weighs 5,700 tons, and it was moved to its final location at the Yanbu 3 desalinization plant. The evaporator can produce 91,000 tons of potable water per day, which is enough for 300,000 people. It's also the largest evaporator in the world, with a length of 123 meters and a width of 33 meters. And seeing as how much potable water it's capable of producing, moving this thing to Saudi Arabia was pretty essential. Number 12, Muon G2 Magnet. Before the Muon G2 Magnet could begin its work helping scientists measure the internal magnetic workings of the muon particle, this 50-foot-long magnet had to be transported from Long Island to Chicago. This magnet was built at the Brookhaven National Lab on Long Island in the 1990s. The trip was 900 miles and took years to plan. Since moving a magnet of this magnitude presented a particularly unique set of problems. The magnet had to be moved in one piece. Breaking it up would ruin the uniformity of the magnetic field, something that's needed for the magnet to do its job. Furthermore, the ring couldn't be twisted more than 3 millimeters, given the fact that the magnet cost more than $30 million to construct. They weren't taking any chances while moving this thing. The Muon G2 Magnet was completely encased in a specially designed cling film. Then it was placed on a special hydraulically leveling trailer. All in, the transport operation took about 5 weeks, but the magnet successfully made its way to the Fermi Lab, where it sits today doing its important muon measuring. Number 11. Prelude FLNG. The Prelude FLNG is one of the largest structures in the world, and given its size, moving this thing is not easy. Unlike some other oil rigs, the Prelude is a floating liquefied natural gas platform, which means it can be moved to any location needed. The oil rig is a double-hulled vessel, and it was built in 2013 in South Korea. It's got a length of about 1,600 feet and a dead weight that exceeds 600,000 tons. It required more than 260,000 tons of steel to build this beast and cost upwards of $13 billion. It was built for use in the Prelude and Concerto gas fields in the Browse LNG Basin, which is just over 100 miles off the coast of Australia. The platform was launched in December of 2013 and made its maiden voyage on July 25th of 2017. The platform had to travel from the place where it was constructed, South Korea, to its site in the waters near Australia. This voyage was 3,600 miles, and although it was slow going for this massive platform, the transportation operation was a success. Number 10. Nuclear Reactor. A nuclear reactor is not something you want to mess with, and even though the nuclear reactor that was transported from Southern California to Utah was decommissioned, the operation was complex given the size of the reactor. The reactor weighed 1.5 million pounds, and it was 16.5 feet in diameter, so it was challenging logistically. The reactor was moved from Southern California Edison San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station to the Energy Solutions Nuclear Waste Facility in Clive, Utah. It was brought down the Nevada highway on a custom-made 122-foot-long trailer, which had to be assembled on-site in North Las Vegas. The load was pulled by 6 heavy-duty Class 8 trucks with 4 tractors pushing and 2 pulling to create a train of sorts. Combined, they offered up 4,000 horsepower to pull this thing, and it traveled at a speed of about 5 miles an hour, and it took 7 days for the reactor to travel the 450 miles along various highways through Nevada. It caused a few road closures, and it was quite the spectacle as it meandered its way across the desert state. Number 9. The Hotel Montgomery. The Hotel Montgomery was built in 1911, and during its heyday, it featured a ballroom, 2 dining rooms, and 142 guest suites. But over time, the hotel fell into disrepair, so when plans were drawn to build a new, fancy hotel on the same site as the Hotel Montgomery, the logical thing to do would have been to tear it down. Yeah, that didn't happen. Instead, San Jose officials decided to move the hotel. Apparently, the hotel has historical significance, and seeing as how it weighs 4,800 tons, though, moving it wasn't easy. The hotel was jacked up, and specially designed remote-controlled cars were slid beneath it. From there, the entire hotel was moved intact, 186 feet to its new location. The transportation cost $8.5 million, and the hotel was renovated once moved. It may seem like an awfully expensive transportation operation, especially for such a short transport, but the cost of moving was apparently less than the cost of building a new hotel, so it was a budget-friendly decision. Number 8. Nuclear waste. Alright, some things that need to be transported cause problems because they're really big. Some cause challenges because of logistics issues, such as moving things across tough terrain or rough seas. And others? Well, some other things are problematic because they're very, very dangerous. This is the case with nuclear waste. Nuclear waste contains radioactive particles and materials that, if released, can cause a whole wealth of health problems, from radiation sickness to cancer to cardiovascular disease, just to name a few. And since most nuclear waste has a half-life of about 30 years, it takes around 30 years for the radioactivity to decay. When nuclear waste needs to be moved, it needs to be done safely. Nuclear waste is often collected and then transported to a disposal facility, and it's transported in a special container. These containers are called casks. Now, these casks are made from high-strength steel and are heavily shielded. So needless to say, because of the contents they're carrying, they undergo very stringent and rigorous testing. Furthermore, because nuclear waste is not something anyone wants spilled, these special casks are built to withstand virtually a wide range of potentially dangerous environmental conditions, like tornadoes, flooding, and even earthquakes. They're also built to withstand ridiculously high heats in case of fire, and high impact in case that the cask is somehow dropped. It's not a nice thing to think about, nuclear waste, but rest assured, when this hazard waste is transported, all efforts are made to make sure it's done safely. Number 6. The Hoag Target. Okay, we all love foreign cars, but have you ever wondered how they get from one continent to the other? Well, until they make a bridge that can cross the Pacific or the Atlantic, which is likely something we won't see in our lifetimes, cars are transported overseas on ships. Now, this next transport operation involves transporting the things that transport us, cars. And when it comes to car transportation ships, then look no further than the Hoag Target. The Hoag Target is the biggest car and truck carrier in the world, officially called a Pure Car and Truck Carrier, or PCTC. The Hoag Target boasts a deck space of 71,000 square meters and has the capacity to transport 8,500 cars at once. The PCTC was built by Xiamen Shipbuilding Industries, and it's now part of Hoag's New Horizon design. The ship's got 14 decks and a length of 200 meters and a width of 36 meters. And apparently this ship is also very efficient, with a hull design that combines high cargo capacity with low fuel consumption. And the Hoag Target is estimated to emit 50% less CO2 per car transported than other car carriers. And given the amount of cars this thing can haul, that's pretty significant. Number 6. The Levitated Mass. The Levitated Mass is an iconic piece of art on display at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. And while it's a famous piece of art, it can be argued that the most iconic part of the Levitated Mass was actually its transport operation. The Levitated Mass was created by Michael Heiser, but before she found her home in the Museum of Art, she resided in Riverside County, California. The giant boulder is 21 feet tall and weighs in at 340 tons, so moving this thing around required a lot of groundwork. The boulder was placed on a transport truck with 176 wheels. But because the truck was so big, the roads it traveled on had to be temporarily closed to accommodate it. Not wanting to cause too much of a headache for those who use the roads, it was decided that the truck would only travel at night. And given the weight of the boulder, the truck couldn't go any faster than 10 miles an hour. The truck sauntered along with the massive boulder on board under the cover of night until it finally reached its destination. The Levitated Mass is, according to some source, the largest boulder ever moved by man. So it's not just a revered piece of art, it's a testament to the art of transportation. Number 5. The Titanic. When it comes to famous ships, none can really rival the fame of the Titanic. The ship that tempted fate, the Titanic, and her tragic sinking continues to fascinate us. But while her sailing and subsequent sinking garners all the attention, she's got a pretty amazing transportation operation story too. Before the Titanic hit the Atlantic waters in 1912 for her inaugural and only crossing, she had to be launched into the water. The launch took place at the Belfast shipyard, and given the fact she weighed 24,360 tons at the time of her launch, moving her to water took a lot of planning. The historic event happened on May 31, 1911, to a lot of fanfare. First, the hydraulic launching triggers that were holding her were released. From there, she slid down the 772-foot-long slipway, entered the water at a speed of roughly 14 miles an hour. Once she hit the water, 80 tons of drag weights attached to 6 massive anchors did their work and brought the ship to a standstill. From there, 5 tugboats hauled her into deep water where she was outfitted with her final furnishings. But how did this massive ship slide down a slipway? This is the most amazing part of the transport operation. They lubricated the slipway with soap, tallow, and train oil. Yeah, you heard that right. They literally slathered on soap, rendered beef and mutton fat, and sperm whale oil to make that slipway nice and slippery. All in, 22 tons of lubricant was used, and it was piled on 1 inch thick. To call this clever is an understatement. It is pure genius, and watching the massive ship slide its way down a soapy, tallowed, oil-smeared slipway was part of the appeal for nearly 100,000 spectators and 90 members of the press who had gathered to watch the ship slip into the sea. Number 4. James Webb Telescope. The James Webb Space Telescope is the most complex, most expensive space observatory ever built, and it's replaced the iconic Hubble telescope to take a look into deep space in the hopes that it can shed some light about the origins of the cosmos. But before it could do all that, it had to travel to its launching site. The JWST had to be transported 5,800 miles to its launch site in Kourou, French Guiana. This telescope is worth a staggering $10 billion, so the trip had to be meticulously planned with no room for any errors. The list of obstacles to be overcome was long, and that included things like safe transportation, obviously, pulling permits, avoiding obstructions, clearing the transportation path, and the physical logistics of transporting such a large object. This telescope was assembled in Greenbelt, Maryland at the Goddard Space Flight Center in 2013, and from there it was shipped to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston for testing. 5 years later, in 2018, the telescope was brought to Northrop Grumman's Core Space Park in Redondo Beach, California. At that location, it underwent more testing to make sure it could withstand rigorous and unforgiving environment beyond the stars. The telescope was then prepared for its big journey to South America. It was packed up into a special suitcase that's called the Space and Telescope Transporter for air, road, and sea. The container alone weighed 168,000 pounds, and it's 18 feet high, 15 feet wide, and 110 feet long. The telescope, under police escort, was brought by a special haul truck 26 miles at night to the Naval Weapons Station Seal Beach, where it was loaded onto a cargo truck. The vessel brought the telescope through the Panama Canal and then by sea to its final destination. The telescope launched on December 25, 2021, and it's now millions of miles away from the Earth. Number 3. The Bullwinkle. The Bullwinkle is a pile-supported fixed steel oil platform that resides in the Gulf of Mexico. But it wasn't always there. It was built by Gulf Marine Fabricators in 1985 through 1988 in Ingleside, Texas at the North Yard location. At the time of its construction, it was the third tallest freestanding structure ever built, with a height of 1,736 feet and a total weight of 77,000 tons. Yeah, it can be hard to understand just how massive this thing is, but for some perspective, the base measures around 4.5 acres. It took 3 years to build the platform, and at the peak of the project, there were more than 700 people working on her. Bullwinkle cost an estimated $500 million to build and install, which is why moving it is one of the most amazing transport operations ever. The platform was shipped using a specially built barge, and this barge was 853 feet long, about 200 feet wide, and 49 feet deep. To prepare for the platform's move, the traffic on the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway had to be diverted. The transport was a spectacular event. The platform traveled 380 miles before it reached its final location. But the move wasn't the only hard part. Once the platform had been moved, installation began. Installing this platform took around 3 months, and it involved 28 pilings that were driven 400 feet into the sea floor and then secured with cement. Bullwinkle was built to withstand hurricane waves and high winds. This massive platform now installed is capable of putting out 50,000 barrels of oil a day. Bullwinkle is the second tallest structure ever moved by man, second only to the Troll A platform. Number 2. Big animals. Zoos and aquariums are wonderful places to see animals and marine life that you wouldn't normally have the opportunity to see. But given the fact that most of the animals in those establishments don't really come from that area, they have to be transported there. Animals have their own unique challenges when it comes to transportation, since they are living, breathing beings. Animal transportation has changed a lot over the years. There are far more regulations regarding the movement of animals today than there has been in the past. Giraffes are generally transported in custom-built containers that accommodate their height. In 2013, a young giraffe named Nakuru was transported from New Zealand over to Melbourne, Australia, by way of sea on a cargo ship. That same year, another giraffe named Tonda was transported to the Chessington Zoo in England. Tonda had a special trailer built for him, complete with an adjustable roof so he could take in some fresh air along the way. And while giraffes and other animals like lions are difficult to move, some mammals are even tougher. Whales, for example, are extremely difficult to transport. In fact, transportation of these majestic mammals is nothing short of amazing. There are 2 ways to move marine life. The first is wet transit. Now, wet transit involves the keeping of the marine life in a large tank of water during the move. This is ideal, but isn't always possible, so the other way to move marine life is dry transit. During dry transit, the animal is put in a padded sling. A human assistant or assistants keep the animal cool and wet during the transit. Keiko, the killer whale from the popular feature film Free Willy, is probably the most famous whale ever moved. He was transported several times, once by trailer and once by air through the United Parcels Service, and then again to Westman Island in Iceland. And although Keiko is the most well-known traveling whale, it's JJ who holds the world record. JJ is the largest animal ever transported. She was a young gray whale who weighed in at a whopping 19,000 pounds. With a length of 31 feet, transporting her took a lot of planning and a lot of moving parts. First, she was lifted onto a custom-made transport sling by a crane. Then she was put in a foam-padded 40-foot trailer. There was just enough water in the trailer to keep her wet during her travels, and once she reached her destination, Point Loma, she was lifted again by crane before being released. Needless to say, transporting animals is not for the faint of heart and requires a lot of specialized knowledge, which is why transporting any type of big or exotic animal is best left to the pros. Number 1. The Abu Simbel Temple. Alright, the final entry on this list is a transport operation of epic proportions, the Abu Simbel Temple. This temple is actually two structures, one for the king and one for his wife Nefertari. The temple is a very popular tourist destination given its age. It dates back to sometime around 1200 BC. We don't have a lot of remaining artifacts from ancient Egypt, so the temple holds priceless historical value and it's truly irreplaceable. It features intricate stone carving of the pharaoh and artwork, incredible hand-carved pillars, statues, wall paintings. The temple is a first-hand look into the time that has long since passed. So when a dam was built in the Nile in the 1960s, archaeologists and historians panicked. The dam caused the water level of Lake Nasser to rise, which put this precious temple in direct danger. Fearing that we would lose the temple or that it would become damaged beyond repair, the Egyptian government, in collaboration with UNESCO, decided to move the temple to a safer location. This was no easy task. The temple is huge, weighing around 31,000 tons. There's no way they could move the whole thing in one piece. They could move it in pieces, though, but the temple, with its statues and art, was extremely delicate, and they didn't want to damage any part of the temple. So the decision was made to cut it up into small pieces, move it, and then put it back together. Now, this may sound simple, but it was anything but. The temple was cut into 1,036 blocks. The blocks were each around 3 tons and were numbered to make sure it was put back together properly. Each block was carefully transported to the temple's new location, 700 feet away at a higher elevation. It didn't travel very far, granted, but moving more than 1,000 priceless blocks of a cut-up temple was a pretty stressful process. All in, moving the Abu Simbel Temple took 2 years to complete and required the help of hundreds of workers. It also cost a lot of money. More than 52 different countries donated to help fund that move. This transport operation was successful. The temple was put back together without any significant damage, and today it remains a widely visited tourist attraction, where it stands proud at a higher, safer elevation. Few transport operations can rival the complexity, the importance, and the sheer ingenuity of the temple's move, which is why the Abu Simbel Temple has moved its way into the top spot on this list of 15 amazing transport operations. I'll see you tomorrow. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.